Hello, my friends, and welcome to Back to Heart. It is late on my end right now. I'm recording at 11:30 p.m. because when inspiration strikes, it strikes, and I've been wanting to make more of an effort coming in here when I have that inspiration because that's when I have the motivation to record or write or create. And so that's what I'm doing here. I wanted my next podcast episode to be about the inner child, and that's what I told you guys it was going to be about, but I'm going to do something a little bit different this podcast episode. And next episode, I will absolutely be bringing that subject into the podcast, into Back to Heart, because the inner child is a very important component into inner self-reflection and inner healing. But today I'm recording this podcast so late because I just had a long weekend with a couple little ones that I nanny, with a family that I nanny for. And it was a beautiful weekend. I was just looking at videos and pictures from the weekend and from the time that we shared. I was with them Friday through Sunday. I wasn't doing overnights for this weekend, but I'll be doing overnights for them in a couple of weeks. This weekend, though, I was with them for at least 11 hours each day. And so, I get to be through all of the stuff that comes up throughout a child's day and through a family's day. And so it brought up this concept that I think about a lot. And I was actually talking to the father of this family about, because he's the one that brought it up, on the subject of patience. And in the subject of patience, we all desire it, right? When we're working with children, when we have our own children, when we're around children, we deeply desire to really embody and embrace our patience with our children. But it can be really hard, it's a really challenging skill to use and apply when we're feeling overstimulated, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when we're feeling tired or hungry. There's a lot of emotions and feelings that come up that can prevent us from holding patience for our children or for ourselves. And the comment that was made by this father is, I was leaving for the evening and he was being kind and saying like he was really grateful for my patience and how much patience I can hold through meltdowns, through a crazy amount of different kinds of behaviors, children bouncing off the walls and throwing things and screaming and all of the things. And it's had me reflecting over the past couple of days because, like I said just a second ago, like patience is a skill. And I tell this to all parents that I work with that name anything about my patience, because I wasn't born a patient being, none of us are. If you work with kids, if you have kids, especially at the young toddler age, that they are not patients. It's something that they're not patient. It's something that we practice and that we start to get better at if we are given the appropriate mindsets and the appropriate skills in order to do so, in order to hold that. But patience was something that I had to make the choice to work on, especially being, when you're in the nanny lifestyle and in the career field and that work field, like if you don't have patience, it's a really, really challenging career to have. And so a long-term career to have, you can nanny for a stint of time, a few months, and not practice the skill of patience, and like you'll get through it. But if you're doing this for years, and I've been doing this for almost a decade now, so doing it for that long without the patience, everything feels way more challenging. So it was like a choice that I had to make. And some of it was conscious, some of it was unconscious. A lot of the conscious choice that I made into practicing patience and improving that skill set was through my mindfulness practices. And some of it was with the intention of being able to hold more patience and space for children. And then some of it was for my own personal healing and support. And so I've been dissecting what patience is, like what the skill set truly is. And the two things that I came to, the components of what patience is, one of them is forgiveness, because you can't have true patience while being in a state of resentment or critiquing or criticism the entire time. So when you're practicing or in a state of patience or practicing patience, those criticisms and those critiquing or those shaming or whatever the inner language is, it will come up in your head. But being in a constant state of forgiving the other person in that experience and forgiving yourself is very important in order to continue holding that patience. For example, today I had a really challenging day with the littlest one that we were working with, or that I was working with, because it was daylight savings, and so she got less sleep the night before. Mom was out of town, and they are a very attachment-based family, and so they do co-sleeping and breastfeeding. And so mom being out of town can be hard on little ones because she's still breastfeeding. So there's emotions that come with that. And then on top of that, I had forgotten a bottle at home, and we were out of the house. And so there was just all of these components that caused for a very emotionally tumultuous day. And so with that, she was obviously very overwhelmed, and then I would get very overwhelmed because, the energy feeds off of each other. And part of my job as a caregiver, I have these inner voices and this inner belief system that I should be making it better. I should be making it go away. I have to make it stop to be a good nanny, to be a good caregiver. She shouldn't be crying. I should be meeting her every need at every moment and not letting her cry. And these are not things that I truly believe at my core, but they are belief systems that have been built into me, whether through society or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Won't get into the whole where these come from right now, but they are there. And so they were coming up throughout our day. And then because those belief systems were coming up, I would have frustration with myself and frustration with the little one whenever she would be going through her emotion, and then I would be going through my emotion, and then we'd be in this cycle. And so then to practice this patience that I was in, I had to constantly over and over and over be offering myself forgiveness for whatever thoughts were coming up that maybe I didn't fully agree with and I felt some shame around. And also forgiving her and her process of feeling whatever it is she was going through and feeling. And then that brings me also to the second component of patience, of compassion. I can't hold patience properly if I'm not able to empathize with the other person. In this situation, it was the littlest one. I had to constantly remind myself she hasn't gotten a lot of sleep. She's hungry. She misses mom. We're out of the house. She's probably hot too. It was a hot day. We were outside, we were running around. We were also in and out of the car. There was a lot of transitions today. So I had to constantly be empathizing with her situation, putting myself into her tiny little baby shoes and thinking about how challenging it must be to be so little and being tired and being hungry and not being able to just go to the cupboard and grab something to eat or go grab the water. She can communicate. She's old enough to communicate her basic needs with me. But they can't always be met in that very moment. Like when we were driving, we had a long drive, and when I was driving, she was upset. She wanted to come out. She wanted to be held, but I couldn't at that moment. And so we're in the car and I'm reminding her she's safe. I'm still here with her. I know this is frustrating. We're in the car, but the reality is that I couldn't meet her immediate needs in that moment. I eventually pulled over like 15 minutes later because she was getting to the point of like being inconsolable. So I was able to pull her out and give her a little bit of presence, and that helped her a lot to be able to pull over and just hold her for a moment. But in that exact moment, I was on the highway, and you can't pull over on the highway, or you could, but it was very dangerous and unsafe. So was not going to put us in that situation. So going through these moments, especially like being in the car, I know a lot of parents go through this experience too, of being in the car, your child is screaming. It can be so hard sometimes, and it can be really easy to like lose your cool. And it happens often. It happens, and that's okay. The biggest thing is to come back again to forgiveness and empathy. Forgiving yourself if you do lose your cool, forgiving yourself if you are getting past the point of no return and kind of losing it for a second, and repairing that with yourself and repairing that with your child of like, oh, that really sucked. That wasn't how I wanted to respond in that situation. I'm sorry. That wasn't how I wanted to say that. That wasn't how I wanted to talk to you. I'm sorry. I'm going to try to do it differently next time, and working on it. And then making that conscious effort to actually work on it and to respond differently. Because that is where the change happens, is in those moments where you really want to snap, where you really just want to let it all go, and not doing it in the way that you have done it before. With that, because we're on the subject already, I do get to those moments where I'm like, okay, I need some kind of release. And in my past, with my like my immediate family, like the family that I grew up with, my experience with the snapping moments or the overwhelm moments would be to scream at the other person, or to get into like more intense altercations. What I've worked through and the tools that I've picked up is to learn how to navigate that energy in a different way. So I actually had to use this today because end of the day, it was a madhouse at home for a good hour as I was like getting dinner ready, trying to feed everybody. Everybody was tired from the day. Baby was crying in the high chair, didn't want food, wanted to be held, didn't want to eat, wanted to eat, like all of, the wish-washy wants and desires because they're so tired and overstimulated. And so then I reached that point and I was like, okay, it's the end of the day. Like I need to do something, because I am frustrated. And so when I had that thought, I was like, okay, they feel this sometimes too. And they're feeling this right now. At least 2 out of 3 of us are feeling this right now. So let me voice this in a way that's healthy. And so then I just told them, I was like, oh, Stacey's feeling very frustrated right now. I need to move my body because I'm feeling very frustrated. And this is exactly how I said it. I make it very playful, but it also gives me an outlet to vocalize, to say what I'm feeling, to let them know, and see my processing, see my experience so that they can learn from me, while simultaneously I get the ability to express through my body. And so as I was moving through that, like, feeling really frustrated, I'm really overwhelmed. I'm like, I need to shake my body. I need to move my body really quick. I'm going to do it right here. And so this whole time, by the way, the little one is still crying. She's not enjoying my process, but this was for my own regulation so that I could help her better. And so I started shaking my body. I started shaking my hands. I started shaking my head. I start jumping up and down and shake my body and shake my hands. So this somatic movement helps for me. This is what I need in this moment, because my energy and the sensations, the bodily sensations start accumulating in my stomach and in the like the solar plexus area, in like chakra terminology. It's getting late. Okay, I don't have good words. Thanks. Verbiage. Words. Anyway, so it gets stuck in my solar plexus, and so to move that in the way that it feels like for me, like up and out, is to like shake my body up and down. This also helps it to root down. So to root down into the ground, it helps me to root my feet. So I start stomping my feet. I'm literally moving every single part of my body to get get this sensation out. I kind of look like a duck. Like if you've ever seen like a duck get into an altercation with another duck, after they are done fighting, they'll do like this whole like body shake, and then they'll shake out their tail. That's kind of what I do when I'm feeling overwhelmed, is I'm like shaking everything out. And then I feel so much better. And it gives me time. And I'm like taking deep breaths throughout all of this too. And it's exaggerated. I'm like, like letting out deep sighs. I apologize if you're listening on headphones. But letting out these deep sighs, letting out all of this energy through the vocal process, but also through the physical body movement. This gives a lot more space, because then I'm not trying to suppress it to try to like keep cool around the kids of like, I am Snow White and I'm perfect and I have no frustration in my body ever. Like, I can have patience and feel frustrated and express it in a way that is still healthy for the children to see. So this gave me then time to, express through my body. And then I was able afterwards to help out little one with her feelings of frustration. I was able to get her out of the high chair and wash her hands and wash her face off, and then just sit with her. And now that my body was more regulated, I could breathe with her and sit with her. And then she started to feel like it was almost immediate. The moment that I was able to express that through my body, her energy started shifting too, because she was picking up on the true calm that I was experiencing, not just this fake facade of calm that I was trying to put on to try to hold it together. So patience is not something that we just innately have as a person. I do think that there can be personality traits that make it a little bit easier for some people to hold a deeper capacity for patience, but I don't think it's impossible for people to build up the skill, even if it's challenging for them. So some people have more fiery personalities, and some people have more watery, some people have more earth, and some people have more airy energy. So with all of these different types of elemental energies, whatever you may identify with, or whatever you use in or identify with astrologically, you may have an easier, more challenging, more difficult time fostering patience and developing that skill. But you do, and you can develop patience. You do have patience and you can develop it. That is all this I wanted to share with you all tonight. But I really wanted to get this out to the world, to share it with you all, because I think it is a very important thing especially for toddler parents to remember in our day-to-day, because we are in the pits of emotions with toddlers, because they're going through it deep, and they're learning, and we get to learn alongside with them if we've never learned these skills. So hope you learned something today. I hope this was helpful for you, and I will talk to you all soon.
I just realized after I ended the podcast and closed out the video that I did not plug in my microphone that whole time. Luckily, I just went back and listened to the audio, and the audio is decent, but it's not my ideal. And I had this thought afterwards that I don't believe was my thought. I think speaking in more of a context of spirituality, which I haven't touched on too deeply. I've talked, like in this episode, I talked a little bit about the chakras, but I haven't really talked too deeply about my belief system. But I don't know when or if I will on this podcast. I do talk about it sometimes on my social media, but I believe that this thought that I just had come from spirit, and I wanted to share it here because I was very upset with myself after I ended the podcast episode, and I realized I hadn't plugged in my speaker in my speaker, because not my speaker, my microphone. I'm getting really tired. We need to end this, but I wanted to come in. I need to do this one. And I was really upset with myself. And so I was sitting here for a moment of like, I opened my computer, I plugged in my camera, and I set up my microphone, but I did not plug it in. And there was a voice in my head that said, let me be imperfect. Let me still post this. Let me still have this shared without trying to refine it and have it presentable in a way that feels good enough to my brain and let it be good enough for the people that need to hear it, because I know that there's many parents that need to hear that message today about patience. And part of me wants to, I was going to re-record it, but then I was like, there's no way. I'm so tired. There's no way I have time for this. And I know I'm not going to come back to this because I don't have enough time this week to re-record this podcast and then also record another podcast on top of that and get to my nanny work this week and do my Beats and Bubbles bash this weekend. And I have my nephew's birthday this weekend. So there's all of this stuff that I have, like all of these responsibilities I have. And I know that re-recording this is not going to be a priority. And so part of me didn't want to post it so that I didn't have to have this podcast episode up and that I didn't have to have my imperfection presentable. And to you guys, it's not going to be that big of a difference. Maybe you can hear the difference now because I plugged in my mic and you can hear a little bit of the audio difference. But the only people that truly care about things like this are the people within the world of podcasting or audio. And in reality, caring too much about it means that I have my priorities in the wrong place if I care more about the audio and less about the message. And so with that, I'm making this public announcement that I vow to post imperfectly and to show up imperfectly and to share the message when I'm being called to share it, because I know that it's important and I know that what I'm experiencing needs to be heard, and what I know and want to share needs to be shared to my community and to the people who listen to this podcast. So here's my imperfection, and I'll have more of it forever. I embrace so much of my imperfection. I feel like in my day-to-day IRL and real life, but online I get stuck in a cycle of wanting things to be a little bit more presentable because I have more time. You can decide what you're posting virtually versus in real life. You have more, flexibility to just be. At least I do in my experience. And virtually, I can plan out my feed, or I can take more time and more space and more energy planning what I want to say. So I'm done with planning. I don't even plan that much, but if I'm not planning it, then I typically don't post and have it out there because it doesn't feel ready. It doesn't feel like it's ready to be put out there into the world. And I want to do things. I want to do this podcast in a very raw way, in a way that I don't always feel ready for. And I think that my previous podcast episodes, my first few podcast episodes, were a little bit more planned because I did, like I said, want those foundational pieces set so that anybody listening to this podcast for the first time can understand what some of these key components are that I will probably refer back to and reference a lot. And you can always go back to those podcast episodes to get information on them. But moving forward, I want it to be more like conversational. Obviously having some informational podcasts and things like that. But I really want to practice getting into more of a casual conversation with community, and with my, I mean, this is a solo podcast, so I'm talking to myself most of the time. I will have some guest interviews here and there, but a lot of the time I'm going to be talking to myself. So you will get the inner workings of some of my thoughts in my mind. If you're not subscribed to my email list, I do have an email list called the Big Hearts Club. I don't send out emails crazy often. Lately, it's been like more once a month, when I'm in sad girl energy or moving through something in my life. I typically feel a little bit more poetic, or I process through verbally, obviously have a podcast, but I also also process through writing. And so I started Big Hearts Club years ago, didn't really use it, and I've rekindled it recently, as a way for other people to witness me in my experience, and for to also give people insight into what it looks like from my experience to go through the healing journey, to embrace emotions, to embrace the spectrum of grief and heartbreak and love and joy. I'm getting kind of choked up talking about it, and I feel like that's a great symbology for what you're going to be getting if you sign up to Big Hearts Club. So I have an email list there, but I also want that to kind of be reflected here in this podcast, because Big Hearts Club is me. You know, all of this work is me and my experience, and something that I am and identify with is being an artist. I think being an artist is just being someone who embraces emotion and portrays it in a way that is creative. And I do that through several different modalities. So Big Hearts Club is one of them. This podcast is one of them. So with all of that being said, this is going to be more of a space with free-flowing conversation, and I might have longer. Oh no, my video got super blurry. What just happened? I don't know what just happened to my video. My video got really, oh, there it goes. Okay. Sorry, podcasters who's listening to this. I also post on YouTube. So if you do not follow me on YouTube, you can check me out on YouTube. You can check out the podcast there. I also have some other series up on my YouTube about relating in conscious ways and how to communicate consciously. I don't really have much on parenting on there yet. The goal is to get more up on there about parenting and raising children on my YouTube. So you could check me out over there, and you can see my face also as I'm talking. I love to watch people as they're talking because I feel like I get more of their energy and get to feel more of who they are by being able to see them. But I also love just listening to people because I like listening to people's voices. Although I'm not huge into ASMR, I think that's what it is, right? ASMR. It grosses me out a lot. I like listening to people talk like organically, but listening to people make weird noises in microphones, like it's like fingernails on chalkboard for me. I can't do it. Anyways, getting way off task here. I will talk to you all soon. We will have more heart-to-heart conversations. We will keep coming back to heart with every single moment, every single conversation. I hope that you all have a beautiful week and day ahead of you, and I will talk to you soon.